If you are curious to dive into the world of influencer marketing, especially getting the right influencers in your corner so that they can help you promote your brand and your business, this episode of the Mindful Marketing Podcast is for you. But before we dive into this fantastic conversation with Sherri Langburt, first, a word from our sponsor. Riverside is the all-in-one podcast recording and editing tool that I use for this right here show. I use it to edit not only the audio and the video, it is like chef's kiss magical, making the entire process so easy. Plus, I love their magic AI clips. Their little AI robot in the background pulls out the most impactful moments of the episodes without me having to comb through and do it myself, resizes them for social media. So those vertical videos you see on TikTok and Reels, those all come from Magic AI inside of Riverside. It's literally one click. It spits out 10 clips. I pick the best one and away I go. Saves me so much time. If you want to get on the Riverside train, check it out today. The link's in the show notes, and make sure to use my code DREA, D-R-E-A, at checkout to get 15% off your membership. I'm excited for this conversation today because I have been on both sides of the aisle as an influencer and as a marketer, and I'm excited to get into what's working here now in today in 2025 with influencer marketing. And with that, Sherri, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Andrea. Nice to meet you. Thanks for having me.
Yes, I'm really excited for this conversation, but to give our listeners some context, tell me, how did you get into the world of influencer marketing?
Okay, I kind of stumbled upon it. I was working in corporate America way back when, and kind of one of the things that I was working on was ad sales. And our business was really subscription focused. And as I started to kind of explore ad sales opportunities, a lot of the brands were looking to work with influencers. And so we put that into our fold, and it kind of started to work really well. And that's when I said, I am going to go break out on my own because no one is doing this and no one is focusing on it. And I'm going to start an agency that focuses on helping the brands and the agencies find the right influencers to do their content promotions.
Yeah, I love this. And I feel like people think, influencer marketing is a new thing, but brands have been using other people to promote their content and their products for a while. But for those people who are listening, how do you define an influencer? What is an influencer?
I mean, look, I think that there's different ways to define, and I think everyone has their own definition. Certainly, if you're looking at a TikTok or an Instagram or a Pinterest or a YouTube, it's going to be very different than the type of influencer that you find on LinkedIn. And I think that it's also very different if you are in pharma or finance, where there's highly regulated industries, versus beauty or food or fashion. So, but, in the industry, I think, there's different thresholds. So there's like the nanos, the micros, the macros, the megas, and all the way up to celebrities. And those are different thresholds. Most people would say a nano is someone who has a following on any of these given platforms of over 5,000 followers. Some would say it's 2,000. I personally think it should be 10,000. So anyone upward of that. And then the tiers start happening as you go higher.
Okay, I want to get into this because I feel like the world of influencer marketing has changed a lot. So for context, I used to be a fashion blogger. I would say, like, if I were going to name drop, I worked with Steve Madden like in 2012. So this was like at the time it was weird. My friends were like, what are you doing? How do you have photos with Steve Madden? Right. And I'm like, oh, I just have my little blog and my YouTube channel. I think it's changed so much over the years. Right. So, if we're taking 2012 to today, like, what are some of the changes at influencer marketing that have happened over the years?
Interesting is like when you start to think about what's going on right now with TikTok, right? I think back then, because I've been doing it even longer than 2012, blogs were still a thing, and long format content in a blog. And the beauty of that was there was not just the written and the video that you could put in there, but there was placements for programmatic. So, but you owned your channel. TikTok wasn't a thing. Pinterest was still kind of a thing. Like, people loved Pinterest. And so I think, and I think that static was still much more of a focus than video. So there's just so many things that come into play. You could also look again at the different verticals and industries. People, certain industries have been later to the game. I think we've gotten very niche, very specific, in terms of like, before it was like, oh, we need mom bloggers or mom influencers or mom creators. Now it's like, we need women who live in Chicago who will eat organic and have, a blue cat and, 3 boys who, don't eat meat. It's so specific now, because there's so many creators. And I think you have to, when we talk about, these buzzwords, like the content has to be authentic. Well, if you want to do a campaign and you're a retailer, but the influencer that you choose shops at your competitors, that's not authentic. So there's a lot more that goes into it than just, we need a mom influencer.
Yeah, it has changed so much. And I think for the better, because I think, brands can get these influencers that are their communities are so bought in, like they're so tuned in, it can make or break a brand. So when you and your company are kind of like looking at these influencers, how can you tell if they actually have influence? Because I've been on these internet streets for a while. I know people can buy followers. So how do you tell if they're like actually influential?
So you look at the engagement rates, right? And you could look at, a like to me is a vanity metric. So anyone scrolling, I have like a big heart. So whenever I see anyone post, I'm liking. I may not even look at what they're doing. And that's just me as a human, right? So I think you look at the comments, and even if they had, great amount of engagement on the comment side, are the comments relevant? So if I'm talking about, a new, protein shake, but everyone's commenting on my haircut, not relevant. So looking at the comments, looking at, I think some metrics that people don't look into, and you could ask the influencer for this, is previous content that they shared, not just the comments, not just the likes, but the saves, the reshares, because the saves show how many people had intent to go back, maybe intent to purchase. The shares show like how many people thought that this was engaging enough to circulate with other people. So the viral nature of the content. You could also look in stories if there was links or, kind of those stickers. So sticker taps, link clicks. I think it's everything that you have to look at, and not just like right up front what you're seeing as an onlooker from their stats.
Yeah, and it's definitely gotten more complicated too, both on the influencer sides and the brand side of like looking at those success metrics. And I think one of the challenging things is, you mentioned like niche communities. Sometimes the niche communities can at first appear smaller, but they're very influential. And you mentioned, with this nano all the way up to celebrity. So, when a brand is looking at, should we go with a bunch of nano influencers or should we go after like a bigger influencer? How do you decide the mix between the smaller like niche communities and the larger, like more seemingly impactful influencers?
So I think it obviously boils down to your objectives and your goals, and every brand is different. But as a marketer, I look at, if I could get one person who's going to create one set of content and reach one audience, versus, let's just say, one is the same amount of, financial investment as 10 or 20 or 30. But I could get those multiple people that add up to the amount of followers and engagements, and as the one, why wouldn't I want to have diverse content, multiple sources of content, different formats of content, reach different audiences, etc.? And so that's kind of where I look at it. I think it's not that one performs better than the other in terms of just the reach. It's everything else. Are your goals to get more content? Are your goals to tap into new audiences? Are your goals to reach people throughout the country in different locations, different voices, different interests? Maybe within the same niche, but a little bit different. I think that's why I always go for the more versus the one.
Yeah. I definitely see the beauty of that too. Even from like a brand perspective, now you have so many more assets to be able to like circulate around with like your community and all of that. Yeah. So speaking of UGC, what do you see working really well right now? Because I think that engagement's down across the board. Like we all can see that, especially on our beloved Instagram. It's just not like it used to be. So what are like the types of content UGC pieces that are working really well right now?
I don't know if it's just necessarily the UGC. I think it's also little touch points, right? There's little places that people aren't leveraging, like making sure the content is in your highlights. If you're hiring an influencer, have that in your contract for a few days or a week, making sure they don't remove the post after they got paid, right? So making sure it stays up there. There's a little notes feature. There's all of these different areas, link in bio. I think that there's all these different areas that are small, tiny touch points that can end up helping optimizing the content more, or showcasing it, like referencing it more is what I'm trying to say. Um, Obviously you look at something like TikTok and how it impacted and all these trends. I think we're going to go away from those sounds and those trends a little bit, and it's going to be more meaningful content. So more the educational, more the experience of me and my life and how I live my life, as opposed to like, a cute song. I'm not saying they're going to go away, but combination of some of these touch points that it's all the little, kind of toggles you could turn to make something work even more.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree. And I think this just goes for like marketing in general. Like there's so many different places where you can connect. So might as well use them all to your advantage. Okay, so when we think about working with influencers, one of the things that was frustrating for me when I was working with influencers is that it really is like relationship management, right? Like when you're working with someone, you're partnering with them, and there's a lot of trust involved there. So when brands are looking at building those relationships, building trust with influencers, what are some of the things that brands can think about as they're starting to go down the path of working with some of these influencers?
So obviously giving a creator is a creator because they're creative, hopefully, right? And so giving them that freedom. One of the things that we see that works really well is collaborating with them in terms of the content. So giving us concepts in advance so that you go back and forth and it's a mutual dialogue. Because I think what creators have to realize too is sometimes if there's 10 creators on a campaign, everyone's submitting the same idea for a recipe, like a poke bowl idea for a rice brand. And so it's not that the brands are trying to give pushback. It's that they definitely don't need 10 poke bowl recipes. It's hitting the same thing. And so giving the creator, I think it goes both ways, giving them some flexibility and creative control in terms of submitting concepts, but also on the creator side, really understanding that it's not that the brand is trying to give you pushback. We do sometimes see brands that are just, we don't like what the influencer's wearing, but that should be in the upfront. Like a brand should kind of, if you don't like what her aesthetic, it's personal, it might not be on brand for you, then you shouldn't, kind of engage with them. So I think giving the influencers the autonomy to do creative, but having parameters in control and letting them know why, as long as you let them know the why. Like we're not trying to be too rigid. We just have different creators submitting ideas, and we want to make sure we have, a broad, pool of options from which to choose. I think also another thing is, what we always have talked about, like these ongoing partnerships. So, instead of just working like one and done, we need you for this, have that ongoing relationship with the influencer. So maybe it's that you do an always on program with the influencer, during key seasons or, 4 times a year, so that they know in advance that their year is as a partner, as opposed to just like, we need you. And, next up, we're going to go with someone else.
Yeah. Yeah, I find that interesting, like the long-term partnership piece, because I find myself just like as a human gravitating towards people who talk very consistently about the things that they love, right? And so when brands can find those influencers who are already kind of having those conversations, I think that really does make it mutually beneficial. What about from the influencer side? I'm just curious, just want to be a little bit nosy too about this, because I think influencers have to also be selective about the brands that they work with. So what are some of the things that brands can do to make their products interesting enough that, the top influencers, top creators want to work with them?
I'm going to say one thing before, because it highlights for both. It's a bridge. I see a lot, when you're not working with an agency and you're an influencer and you're an independent, and then your bill doesn't get paid for the 30 days, the 6, whatever the terms are, the 60 days, the 90 days. And I think everyone should just understand that most influencers are, solopreneurs, and they don't have a legal team to go chasing a bill, making sure you pay your bills on time, because it really impacts the influence. Like, I'm going to cry. Like, it's just so heartbreaking to see that. And I get it, huge multi-conglomerate, one influencer's invoice is getting lost amidst bigger payments that have to go out, but being sensitive to the creator environment, and that, these people, are working with you and for you, and they need to get paid on time. One of the things, in terms of how do you make your product stand out, I think merch. I mean, you started to see it the past few years, but merch is just, and I see it not just like everyone thinks like, okay, I'm going to create a water bottle. It doesn't have to be a water bottle. There's so much creative, or if you're a service brand, bringing things to life with merch, because think about finance. Like, what am I going to show that's really so interesting in finance? There's nothing, and there are things like we've done little baby onesies for an insurance brand. So the moms with life insurance, it brings it to life. I think anything that you could do, we have to understand that the world is so visual right now. And even if you're a brand that maybe doesn't have a product that is visual, or as a complement to a product that is visual, adding that merch is great. We do the custom boxes, not just for the unboxing experience, but for the staging properties within the kit. Because when an influencer gets a kit, they have all this other unique items that create that whole experience and gets them excited. And then their photos and their videos are more elevated, etc. So those are some of the things that we're seeing that really move the needle in terms of, kind of making things stand out.
Yeah, I always love a good unboxing. I'm always the one who, like, if my favorite influencer is unboxing, I'm watching it. I'm watching the whole thing. Like, I want to see, give me the packaging, like, let me hear the crinkle. I need to experience it. And I think it is, like you said, it's a very sensory experience, no matter if you have physical products or not. But one of the things that you mentioned that I'm curious about too is like photos and videos. Is there a particular style of content that's working really well right now for influencers? Is it all video, or are they still alive and well?
Well, Instagram just came out with the new algorithm, like the big reveal of how their algorithm is going to work. I think it dropped this morning. And so I think it's really going to focus on video. Personally, again, it goes back to the brand and what they need. We have brands that reach out that they still need the static because they're using that static for other things, right? They need it for ads. They need it for their website. They need it for product, product books, things like that, sales kits. So it really depends. One of the things that I think so many companies think about or focus on is we need the social awareness. But I'm always pushing like omni-channel, right? How do you, like, influencers is not just like, oh, what's the ROI on influencer? But that's only when you look at it through the lens of like how much awareness and how many sales am I getting? But if you really look at it, like, how could we take the influencer content, which technically is elevated, and drop it into various other parts of marketing? The consumer journey is going to be much more cohesive, and you could save money because you're not going to be like, someone's not going to be sitting there saying, oh, I need to go buy an image from whatever platform they use to buy images or videos on. There's so many other use cases. So I think looking at it through a more holistic lens through the entire marketing organization is important.
Yeah, honestly, to me, that's one of the biggest benefits of working with influencers is that you have a team creating content for you that you can then leverage in other elements. When I was working on this, on the agency side for this, one of my biggest clients was a product, like a beauty brand, where we would do photo shoots, we would do the styled video shoots, but those weren't the top performing content pieces. It was our UGC from our influencers that would drive the content forward. So we were like repurposing the heck out of it because it made the most sense from a brand perspective, and not just on social, but like on the website, in the emails. Like, there's so many different ways you can leverage these assets, especially, depending on how your contracts are laid out. Like, there's so many different things you could do as a brand with that influencer content. So yeah, I mean, you paid for it, might as well use it to its fullest extent, right?
Right.
Yeah. So when we're thinking about that, like headed into this upcoming year, one of the biggest things, I think, challenges that brands are bumping up against is like the AI conversation. So what are influencers, what are brands doing to mitigate the risks of AI? But then also, I would love to hear about like some of the benefits of AI in influencer marketing as well.
I think that you have to make sure that the approvals and checkpoints are in place to make sure that something doesn't look, it's just like my 13-year-old. He comes home from school and he thinks he's going to pull one over, and I know when he uses AI and the teacher knows when they use AI and, there have to be checks in place. But I do think it has merit, right? You're stuck on creating ideas for your content calendar. You could be really specific. I don't think anyone is going to go out and copy exactly, but it's an idea generator. It helps you think of ideas. It helps you check your work. So you could put in, a guidelines from a brief and then upload, the caption copy and say, did I miss anything? Can you edit this? I think it's a good kind of tool in terms of idea generation and editing and things like that. But I think the influencers themselves, they're not going to start replacing themselves and replacing real footage with fake footage in an actual video because this is what they do.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. And I think AI can feel scary. And yeah, there are some people who are like using it maliciously, but I think for the most part, like if we learn to embrace it and use it as a tool to help us with our creative work, it could be really interesting use case. And I think there's just so many ways that we haven't even explored yet, like the true extent of how it can
I
help.
mean, someone put in my name into some, I don't know what platform and said, can you create a BattleBox podcast that would be like a 30-second intro? And it was like me talking, introducing a podcast.
Wild. Yeah.
I'm
Well,
not
time will
doing it.
tell. Time will
I'm
tell.
not doing it, but I'm just saying it's like, I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, I really hope we don't have AI influencers, but I mean, I already see it happening. So yeah, okay. I would love to hear some success stories as well. So I think one of the challenges, especially for brands who are newer to influencer marketing, is that sometimes we can't conceptualize like what does success look like as we're starting to deploy some of these strategies. So can you share an example of a campaign that really stood out to you where the influencer had an impact on the brand's success story?
I'm going to give you two because I just did a campaign wrap-up call with the client. So we have a program that we designed specifically for smaller emerging brands because we know influencer can be daunting, expensive. And so we do these themed boxes where there's 5 brands in a box. Not brand specific, it's a theme. So we just did a kid's toy one for holiday. And that campaign, it's less expensive because you're pooling your ad dollars. It goes out to 20 influencers. So you're getting a lot of bang for your buck. They're all micros. But when we looked at the stats, there were like 100, like beyond, it's not just the impression reach. It was the views were over like 300,000 views. The likes, the comments were over 15, 16, 17,000. I mean, it was outrageous. So I think, looking at like different creative ways to do influencer, that's one example. I think you have to also frame it. A lot of times a newer brand, an emerging brand, everything is ROI focused. They're dependent on that sale. And so if that's where you are, that's okay. But then I would just focus on working independently, find 1 or 2 people, search for people who actually know your brand maybe or writing about your brand, and work with one person and grow it organically until you get to 2 people or 3 people when you can afford it. I think the misconception is I'm going to work with one influencer and they're going to get me this many sales. And once you think it's just sales driven, it's not just sales driven. As I said before, there's so many other ways in which an influencer can move the needle for you. So they're saving you in terms of creating your own content. Now you have a content library. You could use these assets. You could boost an influencer's content. You could turn it into ads. You could use it for your website, your newsletter, ratings and reviews, endorsements. Like, look at this influencer who worked with us. So I think thinking of creative ways, and I'll give you an example, like on smaller spends, if you spend, it's not going to be if I spend $5,000, I'm going to get $15,000, $20,000, $30,000. You have to think of other ways. in which you're going to monetize that content. I'm not saying it can't happen. It does happen. But, repeating a message over and over, especially when you're a smaller brand and no one knows who you are, is really important.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the beautiful things that I love about influencer marketing is like, it's not us patting ourselves on the back going like, oh, our product is awesome. It's like someone else like validating that for us and in our marketing. And I love this idea of the curated box, like influencer box. It's such a brilliant idea. Beautiful. I love it. So if someone's listening to this, they're like, okay, I need to work with Sherri and her team. Tell us more about how you help brands and influencers work together.
So we work on the brand side, right? We have thousands of influencers, but we work on the brand side. We do brand dedicated campaigns, which is what probably everyone knows and sees and loves, right? A regular influencer campaign. We have our pro promotions, which are these themed multi-brand solutions. We have all different boxes: food, new mom and baby, pet, kids, health, wellness. Those bring in 5 non-competing brands. And then we do the custom kits too. But essentially, we're working with companies or the agencies to come up with the strategies, find the right program, make up the whole kind of scope of work for what we're going to do. And then we find the influencers that fit the specific need that we're looking to do.
Yes, I love this. So if you're listening to this and you want to work with Babblebox, I'm going to put a link in the show notes, onlinedrea.com/350, so you can learn more. Where else can people connect with you online?
I'm on LinkedIn under Sherri Langburt on LinkedIn. And then Babblebox is Babblebox Official on LinkedIn, on Instagram, and all the other channels as well. And then our website.
Oh, awesome. Awesome. I'll put all of those links in the show notes. Y'all check them out. Sherri, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you so much. It was so lovely chatting with you.
Yes, and thank you, dear listener, for tuning in to another episode of the Mindful Marketing Podcast. Make sure you join us in the Mindful Marketing Lab if you want to go even deeper into these marketing strategies. We have a special guest coming in the lab this month to talk all about playfulness in marketing and in our business, so stay tuned for that. And I'll have a new episode for you next Tuesday, so I'll see you then. Bye for now.